So hello everyone, thank you for the opportunity to be here and demonstrate the cone harvesters. Before I tell you what we have here and how these are used.
Hey Martin, I'll introduce you first.
Yeah.
Okay, this is Helmut Fandrich. He's the inventor of these two machines. There's one more style. And Martin's his son. He helps out now. Helmut and I have known each other for over 50 years. Anyway.
He was a teenager then.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, so go ahead, you guys. I'm going to leave that with you. Okay, thank you.
Thanks. So Helmut will be happy to answer any questions and tell any sorts of tall tales and stories about the use of these over the years, but I will give you a brief introduction into what they are. But even before I do that, I will give you a brief introduction as to what we are not. We do not collect cones. We do not fly helicopters. We do not even sell machines. What we do is we design machines, build machines, and then rent machines to people who do want to collect cones. And generally it's done by per hectare, per bushel of cones. So the more successful the cone collection is, the more successful we are in running the machines. So the machines essentially operate being suspended from a helicopter. They're roughly 350 to 450 pounds each, depending on the different models. So they're generally handled by 2 or 3 people in manhandling them onto trailers and things like this. They're based on a high hollow composite cone. So they're suspended from long line from a helicopter by the cables, which are connected to the bottom of the machine. And there's a electrical connection that also hooks up to the helicopter. Relatively simple electrical connection, as you can tell. And there's a small Honda utility motor that runs as they're operating, which operates the hydraulic system, hydraulic oil. And there are various models. There's one model that isn't on the trailer here, which does not have the hydraulic system or the motor. And that one shears the branches of, sorry, one step back a bit. So the helicopter long lines these down and drops them over the trees. And by the shape of the cone, the branches kind of bend and the crown pops up in the center. The version that isn't shown here has blades around the outside. So the force of the helicopter lifting up shears off the branches, which then fall into a basket, which can then be taken to a dump site. This is the iteration that actually shears the top of the trees. So again, the crown comes up here. This yellow arm here, directs the treetop to this anvil, well, the anvil there, and the blade here, and it gets cut off, and the top falls into the basket here, which is currently folded up, but is generally folded down. And then after a number of tops, the cones obviously being attached to the top that's been cut off, that goes to a dump site, which hopefully is quite close to where you're actually picking. The longer the taxiing time between the dump site and the trees, the more helicopter time, obviously. But when they get to the dump site, the treetops are then pulled out, and the helicopter flies off to the next strand of trees. And it can do a number of trees between dump sites. There's another version of the machine that has an automatic dumping basket. So once the trees are in there, helicopter hovers over the dump site, hits a button, and it opens up and automatically dumps, and the helicopter flies off. So that's slightly quicker. This particular one is a lighter weight one and requires a manned crew to pull the tops out before the helicopter can fly off. The version of the machine on the top does not cut off the branches or the top. The hydraulic motor, the hydraulic system runs 2 hydraulic motors which flail the fingers, the composite fingers there on the 2 drums, which knocks the cones off into the area here, into the netting. And then when it comes to the dump site, the netting opens up in kind of a clamshell on both sides. The load falls out, and then the helicopter flies off again. So that's essentially how the machine operates and what happens. So at this point, if you could remind what I've mentioned, what I neglected to mention, or any questions or anything like that, feel free to come up and give them a gentle kick if you like. They've evolved over the years. a number of things. When you design machines, they often look really, really good on paper or these days on computer. And then you send them out into the field to get used, and you realize there's all sorts of ways that they can be used in the field which you never anticipated happening. So you kind of modify the design and all the rest. So these have been modified in the development process over the years, and these are kind of how they ended up. So they're relatively durable, having been through the grist mill of actual use in the actual field. So again, we do not actually pick the cones, but we design and supply the machines. And as I say, any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
What would be a decent capacity in amount of trees per hour?
Capacity in trees per hour?
He's the expert in the cone harvesting, I'll tell you that.
Oh, it says I have a world record.
World record.
Yeah, about 35 hectoliters an hour. That's over 100 bushels an hour. So you need a large crew to keep up or not.
So Don, maybe you could comment on, with the 3 pieces of machinery that's been explained, what would you select and for what species?
Yeah,
choices?
Good point. Okay, the topper we used for species that have all the cones at the top of the tree, like Laziocarpa. It's also got a narrow crown because the top is only so big, and it can get over and get down about 6 feet, something like that. So it's good for Laziocarpa in particular, or very conical spruce or other species with a narrow crown. This one here works for the fingers that beat the cones off, works well for species that the cones are easily detached from the branch, like interior Douglas fir or interior spruce. The other one that's not here, the branch collector or cutter, works well for species that have all the cones close to the top, but have wider crowns, because the opening of this is 2 feet, I think. Isn't that right? Whereas the other one is 4 feet.
4 feet.
Yeah. So you can get down the crown, again, about 6 feet or so, and get the majority of the cones. In terms of seed damage, Dave Richardson was saying it wouldn't fly in England because of the concern about damaging trees. One grand fir site in the Buckley Bay area, mid-Vancouver Island, in the last 25, 30 years, we've collected there 4 times. And they've responded very well. I think in that particular area, the second or third time, it probably produced more than the first time. But, yeah.
Sorry. By the way, talking about the collecting, when we first went into our machine with the topper on, we took it to Oregon to demonstrate the machine, and supplied the old branch collector machine there. He had ordered that. So the forester said, I don't like the idea of the top being cut off. I said, fine, you can use the other machine, but give me a chance, go out for one try and see what it can do for you. He went out, came back with about seven or eight trees, and 6 of those tree tops had multiple tops. A ice storm had gone through several years. An ice storm had gone through several years ago and had cut almost all the tree tops down from the ice storm. And when he looked at the top, his hair was this machine.
Put your hand down there. Yeah.
A very clean cut. Just go ahead to do the top off. It's like the way Don said, it rejuvenates and gives you a good crop afterwards too. And another thing may say, in 1993 when we came up with this machine, we had all machines working that we have, and we came up with collected 9,200 hectoliters of cones at one season. And me being good at math, I calculated that with this seeds produced the seedlings, you can plant the seeds around the equator at 3-meter intervals 150 times. So you'd have a row 150 times in one season.
When Helmut first started working on it, his brother was a helicopter pilot, and I think Ed probably McDonald approached you, my co-worker, and
we started on the island and we'd try with the other style on amabilis fir, and every day we'd collect cones, and every night we'd be in the company's shop welding and fixing cables and repairing holes in the side with plaster and all kinds of things. So they've come a long way.
That's what like people like you who did it, fixed it up, got to the stage where it is now. You can work and pretty safe. It'll be good for you.
Yep.
And if you want to have a number of sheets here, that gives you the various whole collection volumes. The various sort of tests we had, what the volume is per species, and what you can expect under certain conditions. The figures are all here. If you'd like to pick up a copy of this, it's here on this table.
I was going to ask, I find this difficult to believe, but when you're cutting the top of the tree out, if you were doing that in a growing crop, it's going to affect the apical dominance in the tree and the straight growth of the tree. Do you find foresters object to that? I know you've already said, but in a growing crop, in a younger crop, would you still use this type of
We're pretty selective about the stands we harvest in. Usually they're older second growth, 80, 90 years old or mature.
Yeah.
But no, we've never had any pushback really that way. I think over time we've dropped 2. Yeah, Ed dropped 1. I think that was toast. It was it got stuck on the top of the tree. They had to fall the tree. It was plastic and steel after. And then in 2007, I never told you this. I thought you'd get mad. Statute of limitations. My son, we had 2 machines. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
And I was working one area, my son was working in another. It was in late October. We were collecting yellow cypress on a very mountainous, steep area. The pilot took off with the rake, headed out, and it was cold because you have the doors off the helicopter. So he went to put his gloves off, and he went click, and the rake went down 200 feet towards a rock bluff. It turned slightly sideways, and it hit a yellow cedar tree about 20 feet tall, sliced it down the middle, and stopped 1 foot before the rock bluff. But my son, who fortunately is in very good shape, he had to hike 2 kilometers up, and they lowered a power saw into him, and then he had to cut it off, which worked really well. He said he was really happy to see it fly away, and then he realized he had to go back down packing a power saw off his rock glove. So.
Well, now you know why we have it. If they can fix it, if it drops like that, they take it to the shop and fix it.
Yeah.
And as long as we don't know about it, we're happy.
I've got very good at fiberglassing.
Yeah.
Following up on David's comment, I wonder with this non-destructive type with the fingers, whether there's some applications on a smaller size in seed orchards. You know, even with a larger drone, whether, you know, that's something that would be considered. You know, we're all sort of faced with these labor crises, and whether that's just pipe dreams or anything worth developing, or...
Well, I think the problem is back to that crown management. We don't have nice, just straight one. We're trying for the multiple leaders, so it would be, you'd have to have it pretty wide. I love the idea, though.
I'm very interested in your question because about 20 years ago, we're working on a machine. We work on a machine called the orchard rake, and it's similar like this, except it opened up like that, and you go against the bottom of the tree and work your way up like that. And we developed it to a stage where it was working, but we felt it was not usable enough on a commercial scale. So then I got interested in something else like 3-piston heat engines, and we left it there. So it's staying there, but it hasn't yet been developed. Now, if I know there's a market for it, or an engineer that can develop it, here's a chance to develop it something if you feel that it's worthwhile.
Or something like the blueberry pickers, where it goes along the sides and
It collects it, yes.
Yeah.
If you can fly underneath the helicopter, then we could do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It might not be practical for us.
I would have to ask my brother, would you fly it?
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily have to be flown. I mean, presumably a crane or something.
Or
Yeah,
that
yeah.
just, you know,
Or
Yeah.
pulled behind a tractor. Or...
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like there's a Bushido flail mower that you can turn up sideways, and you can get one that has like a little elbow on top. You
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, that's part of why I mentioned at the beginning, we don't actually collect cones. We just develop a machine. So if there are opportunities to help out by developing new versions of machines or something, we're all ears, but we don't necessarily know about it.
The return interval of doing a mechanical harvest in an orchard would be longer than what we probably prefer. With lodgepole pine, you're doing mechanical harvest, you'd be damaging next year's crop at the same time. And but it's intriguing to think about. Maybe there is a way of designing something that could harvest the cones without damaging, so you don't have a crop, have to wait several more years for a second crop.
But if you're doing a fir or spruce with those fingers, it'd be
right.